So you want to build muscle faster, right? Here's the deal. Most people think it's about magic supplements, fancy machines, or that one secret exercise. The truth? It's actually about doing the basics really well, with a little bit of smart science behind them. Let's break down the techniques that actually move the needle for muscle growth. First, you've got to get your training volume right. Too little, and you're basically wasting your time. Too much, and you're digging yourself into a recovery hole you won't climb out of. The sweet spot, somewhere in the middle, enough sets and reps to challenge your muscles, but not so much that you can't bounce back for your next session. Think quality work, not endless junk volume. Second, progressive overload is the engine that drives growth. Muscles don't grow because you asked nicely. They grow because you gave them a reason. That means adding weight, adding reps, or improving your technique over time. If your training log looks the same month after month, don't expect your muscles to look any different either. Third, let's talk nutrition. Protein isn't optional. You need enough of it spread throughout the day to support muscle repair and growth. Carbs, they fuel your training and help recovery. Fats, essential for hormones. The balance matters. But here's the kicker. If you're not eating in a slight calorie surplus, you're basically telling your body, hey, don't worry about building new tissue. Eat enough to grow, not just to maintain. Finally, recovery is the silent hero. You don't build muscle in the gym. You stimulate it there. The growth happens while you're resting, sleeping, and recovering. That means prioritizing sleep, managing stress, and not treating rest days like punishment. If you train hard but sleep like garbage, you're putting the brakes on your own progress. At the end of the day, muscle growth isn't about magic. It's about consistency with the fundamentals, done smarter. Dial in your volume, push overload, fuel your body, and actually recover. Do that, and you'll grow. Not overnight, but steadily, predictably, and way faster than if you just wing it. When we talk about building muscle, one of the most misunderstood but crucial parts of training is volume. People either treat it like some magical number that unlocks gains, or they completely ignore it and just do whatever feels hard. But the truth is, volume is the total amount of work you do, sets times reps times weight, and it plays the single biggest role in determining how much muscle you'll actually grow. The problem is that too many people either don't do enough to stimulate growth, or they go completely overboard and end up training like maniacs, thinking more is always better. Spoiler alert, it's not. Think of your muscles like little construction sites. Every workout is like sending workers in to build more muscle fibers. If you send in too few workers, let's say 1 or 2 guys, they'll get some bricks in place, but it's not enough to see noticeable growth. If you send in way too many workers, like an entire city's worth, they'll just trip over each other, make a mess, and exhaust the whole crew so badly that by the time the next shift is supposed to start, nobody's recovered. The sweet spot is somewhere in between. Enough workers to keep building consistently, but not so many that they're burning the place down. That's what proper training volume really is. Now, the challenge is finding that sweet spot, and it's different for everyone. Beginners can grow on surprisingly little volume. Sometimes just a couple of solid sets per muscle group per week gets them going because their bodies are so fresh to training. But as you get more advanced, your body adapts and you need more work to keep stimulating growth. For some people, that might mean 10 sets per week per muscle group. For others, it might be 20. And no, 50 sets of chest every Monday is not the secret to a massive bench press. It's the secret to fried joints and stalled progress. What you want to think about is your maximum recoverable volume, the point at which you're still getting bigger and stronger but can recover in time for the next workout. If you're crushing yourself with so much volume that your next session feels like you're lifting through wet cement, you've gone too far. On the flip side, if you can breeze through your workouts and you're not even sore or tired, chances are you're leaving gains on the table. The trick is monitoring your performance and recovery. Are you getting stronger week to week? Are you actually progressing in your lifts? If yes, then your volume is probably right where it needs to be. The mistake people make is confusing feeling exhausted with being productive. Just because you crawl out of the gym drenched in sweat, barely able to walk, doesn't mean you did something magical for muscle growth. It probably just means you hammered yourself with junk volume sets that weren't heavy enough or targeted enough to stimulate growth, but they still drained your recovery. That's like working overtime at a job, but not actually producing any extra results. Looks impressive, but you're just wasting energy. So how do you set your volume in a practical way? A good rule of thumb is to start at the lower end, maybe 8 to 10 working sets per muscle group per week, and see how your body responds. Notice I said working sets, not warm-ups. not just random pump sets with pink dumbbells, but actual hard sets that challenge you close to failure. If you're growing and your lifts are going up, great, stick with it. If you're not seeing progress after a while, add a couple more sets per week and see if that moves the needle. It's about testing, adjusting, and finding your personal sweet spot. And let's also be real. Different muscles can tolerate different amounts of volume. Your quads and back can usually handle and benefit from a bit more because they're big muscle groups with a lot of endurance capacity. But your biceps or triceps, you blast them with 20 sets per week and they're going to start hating you fast. Smaller muscles need less, bigger muscles can take more, and that's just how the body works. Recovery is where this really ties together. If you're doing the right volume, you should feel challenged, but also ready to go by the time your next session rolls around. If you're still sore 5 days later or you feel weaker, you've crossed the line. Remember, the gym is where you stimulate growth, not where growth happens. Growth happens outside, when you're resting, eating, and sleeping. So if your training volume keeps you so beat up that you can't recover properly, congratulations, you're just training harder, not smarter. Another huge point people miss. More volume over time is a good thing, but only if it's done progressively. You can't just jump from 10 sets to 30 sets overnight and expect magical growth. Your body adapts slowly. You want to add volume gradually as you get stronger and more conditioned. That way you actually build muscle instead of just building fatigue. Here's a simple way to think about it. Your goal is to find the minimum effective dose, the least amount of volume you can do that still gets you growing. Then as you adapt, you slowly add more. That's sustainable and it keeps you improving long term. If you just blast yourself with maximum volume from the start, where do you go from there? You've already maxed out your workload and all you've done is set yourself up for burnout. At the end of the day, optimizing training volume is about balance. Enough work to make your body say, okay, I guess we need more muscle to handle this, but not so much that your body says, forget it, I can't keep up. Most people don't fail to grow because they don't work hard enough. They fail because they don't work smart enough. Volume is the lever you can pull to make sure you're in that sweet spot, where training is tough but productive and recovery actually supports the gains you're chasing. Progressive overload is one of those terms that gets thrown around in gyms all the time, but a lot of people don't really understand what it actually means. Some folks think it's just about slapping more weight on the bar every week. Others think it's about chasing a pump until your arms feel like balloons. The truth is, progressive overload is the foundation of muscle growth, and it's much simpler and more boring than people want it to be. But boring doesn't mean unimportant. It means it's so effective that you don't need gimmicks to make it work. At its core, progressive overload means giving your muscles a slightly bigger challenge over time so that they have a reason to adapt. Think of it this way. Your body is lazy. It doesn't want to spend energy building more muscle unless it absolutely has to. Muscle is expensive tissue. It burns calories just sitting there. So if you keep lifting the same weight for the same reps over and over, your body figures, why bother changing? We can already handle this. But the moment you push it past what it's used to, your body says, all right, time to reinforce these muscles so we don't die next time. That's growth. Now, adding weight to the bar is the simplest and most obvious form of overload. If you bench 100 pounds for 8 reps today, and in a few months you're benching 120 for 8 reps, you've overloaded your muscles. They had to grow stronger and bigger to keep up. But here's the catch. You can't just keep adding weight forever. If that were true, we'd all be benching cars by now. Strength gains slow down over time, and at some point, weight alone won't cut it. That's why overload isn't just about weight. It can also be more reps with the same weight, more sets, better technique, shorter rest times, or even just controlling the bar better through the range of motion. For example, let's say you squat 200 pounds for 5 reps. Next week, instead of trying 210 and failing miserably, you stick with 200 but do 6 reps. That's overload. Or you keep it at 5 reps, but you do an extra set. Still overload. Or maybe you move that same 200 pounds with cleaner technique, deeper range, or a slower eccentric phase. Guess what? That's overload too, because you're making the movement harder and forcing adaptation. The point isn't that you must add weight every single workout. It's that you must keep nudging the challenge forward in some way that your body notices. A mistake a lot of lifters make is chasing overload too aggressively. They'll pile weight on the bar, but sacrifice form, cut the range of motion, or bounce the weight around just to say they progressed. That's not real overload, that's just cheating yourself. Real overload is about quality. Did you actually make the muscle work harder, or did you just trick yourself into thinking you did? Adding 20 pounds but only moving the bar 3 inches isn't progression, it's ego lifting. On the flip side, there are people who never push at all. They do the same workout with the same weight for months or even years, and then wonder why their body hasn't changed. If your logbook looks identical week after week, your muscles have zero reason to grow. Remember, your body adapts to what you consistently demand of it. No new demand, no new growth. This is why tracking your training matters so much. If you're not writing down what you lifted, how many reps and how many sets, you're basically flying blind. You can't overload progressively if you don't even know what you did last time. The lifters who grow the most consistently aren't always the ones with the fanciest programs. They're the ones who show up, track their lifts, and make sure they're doing a little better each time, even if it's just one more rep or a slightly cleaner set. And let's be clear, overload doesn't need to be massive leaps every week. In fact, it almost never is. The beauty of muscle growth is that small, consistent improvements add up. Adding 5 pounds to the bar every few weeks might sound tiny, but over a year, that's a huge jump. One extra rep here, one extra set there, it snowballs into real progress if you stay consistent. People overestimate what they can do in a month, but underestimate what they can do in a year with steady overload. There's also a balance to be struck. Too much overload too soon and you run into recovery issues. If you go from squatting 200 for 3 sets of 5 to 200 for 10 sets of 10 overnight, yeah, that's overload, but it's also insanity. You'll dig yourself into such a recovery hole that your body won't grow. It'll just be busy trying to patch itself back together. Effective overload is gradual, sustainable, and paired with enough recovery and nutrition to actually support adaptation. Let's also remember that overload looks different for beginners and advanced lifters. Beginners can overload almost every workout. Their bodies are so fresh that they'll get stronger and bigger just by showing up and trying hard. But advanced lifters, the curve flattens, progress gets slower, and overload might mean just 1 or 2 more reps over an entire training block. That's normal. The stronger and bigger you get, the harder it is to keep nudging forward, but that doesn't mean it stops, it just slows. Patience is key. At the end of the day, progressive overload is simple, but it requires discipline. You can't fake it, you can't shortcut it, and you definitely can't replace it with fancy exercises or flashy gym trends. If you want to grow, you have to consistently do just a little more than before. More weight, more reps, more quality work. It doesn't happen overnight, but it works every time for every lifter willing to put in the effort. That's the boring truth, and it's also the most powerful one. When it comes to building muscle, most people focus almost entirely on training. They obsess over sets, reps, exercises, and programs. But they forget the fact that training only sets the stage. The actual growth happens because of what you do outside the gym. And nutrition is the biggest player in that. You can have the best training plan in the world, but if your diet isn't supporting it, you're basically trying to build a house without bricks. The foundation's there, the plans are solid, but nothing's going to stand up because you don't have the raw material. Nutrition is those raw materials. The first and most obvious part is protein. If you're not eating enough protein, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Protein is the building block of muscle. Literally, every time you lift, you're creating micro tears in your muscle fibers, and your body needs protein to repair and grow them back bigger and stronger. Now, some people hear protein and think that means chugging 3 tubs of powder a day, or eating nothing but chicken breast until they never want to see poultry again. That's not what I'm saying. The real goal is simply to hit a consistent intake that supports muscle growth, usually somewhere in the range of about 1 gram per pound of body weight per day for most people. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can get it from lean meats, eggs, dairy, fish, or yes, protein powder if it helps you hit your numbers. The source isn't magical. The consistency is. But protein alone isn't enough. Carbohydrates are another huge piece of the puzzle. They often get demonized in fitness circles, but the reality is your muscles love carbs. Carbs are the body's preferred fuel for intense training. When you crush a heavy workout, your body's burning through glycogen, which is stored carbohydrate in your muscles. If you don't replenish that with your diet, good luck performing at your best in the next session. Not only that, but carbs also help drive recovery by reducing muscle breakdown and spiking insulin, which is anabolic. That doesn't mean you need to eat donuts every day, but it does mean that smart carb choices, rice, oats, potatoes, fruits, whole grains should absolutely be part of your plan if you want to maximize growth. Then there are fats. People sometimes treat fats like the enemy because they're calorie dense, but fats are absolutely essential for hormone production, including testosterone, which plays a key role in building muscle. You don't need to drown everything in olive oil or eat sticks of butter to get enough, but you also don't want to cut fats so low that your hormones take a nosedive. The balance is usually somewhere around 20–30% of your total calories coming from fat, mostly from quality sources like nuts, seeds, avocados, fatty fish, and oils. The point isn't to make fat your main energy source, but to make sure you're supporting the hormonal environment your body needs to grow. Now let's talk calories. This one is huge because no matter how perfectly you balance your macros, if your total calorie intake is too low, you're not going to build muscle. Muscle is a luxury item to the body. It only builds when there's extra energy available to support it. If you're eating at maintenance or in a deficit, your body says, hey, we've got just enough to survive. We don't have the resources to build anything new. That's why a calorie surplus is critical. Not an all-you-can-eat pizza buffet surplus where you gain 20 pounds in a month, but a controlled, slight surplus enough that your weight is creeping up slowly, maybe half a pound to a pound per week. That way, you're providing the energy your body needs to build muscle without packing on unnecessary fat. Another underrated piece of nutrition is timing. No, you don't need to set an alarm to eat protein every 2.5 hours like some old bodybuilding magazines suggested, but spreading your protein intake across the day, say 3 to 5 meals with at least 20–40 grams of protein each, gives your muscles a steady supply of amino acids, which supports better growth. And having carbs before and after training, that's just common sense. Before, it fuels your performance. After, it jumpstarts recovery. You don't need to slam a shake within 30 seconds of your last rep, but getting a balanced meal in within a couple of hours goes a long way toward optimizing results. Hydration also ties into this conversation. People underestimate how much being even slightly dehydrated can tank performance. Water is involved in nearly every metabolic process in the body, including muscle contractions and nutrient delivery. If you're dragging in your workouts, sometimes it's not that you need a fancier pre-workout, it's that you need to actually drink enough water throughout the day. Aim for a steady intake, not just guzzling half a gallon before you hit the gym. Of course, supplements always come up. Do you need them? No. Do they help? Some do, in small but meaningful ways. Creatine is one of the most researched and effective supplements for muscle growth and strength. Protein powder is just a convenient food source, not magic. Caffeine can improve performance. Beyond that, most flashy products are just expensive ways to make your urine more colorful. If your basic nutrition isn't locked in, protein, carbs, fats, calories, supplements won't save you. The bottom line here is that nutrition isn't about extremes or gimmicks. It's about consistently fueling your body with the right amounts of the right stuff so it can actually grow. Training breaks your muscles down. Nutrition builds them back up. If you're skipping meals, undereating, or living off junk food, you're leaving a huge chunk of your potential gains on the table. But if you dial in your protein, keep carbs in to support training, balance your fats, eat in a smart surplus, and stay consistent, you're setting your body up to turn all that hard work in the gym into real, visible progress. Recovery is one of those topics that people love to ignore until it smacks them in the face. Everyone wants to talk about lifting heavier, doing more sets, or finding the perfect split, but very few want to admit that the real magic happens outside the gym. Training is the spark, but recovery is the fuel. Without it, you're basically lighting matches on a wet log. Lots of effort, no fire. The body doesn't grow when you're lifting. It grows when you're resting, eating, and sleeping. And yet, most lifters treat recovery like an afterthought, something they'll figure out later, right after they've destroyed themselves with marathon workouts. The most obvious pillar of recovery is sleep. And not just I closed my eyes for a few hours and hoped for the best kind of sleep. I mean consistent, high-quality sleep, 7 to 9 hours a night. Sleep is when your body ramps up processes like protein synthesis and hormone release, especially growth hormone and testosterone. Miss out on sleep and you're missing out on one of the most anabolic states your body can be in. There's a reason people who brag about surviving on 4 hours also tend to look like they've been run over by a truck because their body is literally running on fumes. You want to grow muscle? Treat sleep like part of your training program, not an optional luxury. Next is managing stress. This might sound like self-help talk, but it's pure physiology. Chronic stress jacks up cortisol levels. And while cortisol isn't evil, it's part of life. When it's constantly elevated, it eats into recovery. High stress makes it harder to sleep, harder to digest food properly, and harder to build muscle. If you're constantly wired, anxious, and running on caffeine and bad vibes, your recovery will suffer no matter how dialed your training and nutrition are. Stress management doesn't mean moving to a cabin in the woods. It can be as simple as walking, meditating, or just setting boundaries so life doesn't bulldoze you every day. Now let's talk about rest days. For some people, the idea of taking a day off is horrifying. They think if they're not crushing the gym 7 days a week, they're wasting time. But here's the irony. If you never give your body a chance to recover, you're not actually growing. You're just spinning your wheels in a state of constant fatigue. Rest days are not wasted days, they're growth days. That's when your muscles repair and actually get bigger. Active recovery, like light cardio, stretching, or mobility work, is great too. But don't confuse that with grinding out another brutal lifting session. Rest is productive, period. Nutrition also plays into recovery, which we already talked about in detail, but it's worth repeating here. If you're under eating, especially in protein or calories, recovery is going to stall. Training volume and overload are only as effective as the resources your body has to repair with. It's like trying to patch a roof without enough shingles. Good luck keeping the rain out. If your goal is to maximize growth, think of every meal as an investment in your recovery account. Miss too many deposits and you'll overdraft, and your progress will show it. Another overlooked part of recovery is managing fatigue. Training creates two types of fatigue: local, in the muscles you worked, and systemic, in your nervous system and whole body. If you're constantly grinding to failure on every set, never deloading and ignoring the signs your body is sending you, you're going to crash. Deloads, planned periods where you reduce volume and intensity, aren't signs of weakness. They're strategic resets that allow your body to recover fully so you can come back stronger. Ignoring them is like driving your car 50,000 miles without an oil change. Sure, it'll run for a while, but eventually something's going to break in a big way. Hydration and general health also factor into recovery more than people realize. Being dehydrated, deficient in micronutrients, or sick all the time wrecks your ability to train and recover. Lifting doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the context of your overall health. Take care of the basics. Drink enough water. Get your vitamins and minerals from real food. Don't treat your body like a dumpster, and your recovery will thank you. Let's also address the mental side of recovery. Grinding nonstop, without breaks, not only wrecks your body, but also burns out your mind. Training should be challenging, but it shouldn't feel like punishment 24/7, allowing yourself downtime. Hobbies outside the gym, and even mental breaks from obsessing over lifting helps you come back more motivated. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. If you want to be lifting and growing 5, 10, 20 years from now, recovery is what makes that sustainable. So how do you know if your recovery is actually on point? Simple markers include steady strength gains, low to moderate soreness that resolves within a couple of days, good energy levels, and consistent motivation. If you're constantly exhausted, regressing in your lifts, or sore for a week after every session, those are red flags that your recovery isn't keeping up with your training. Instead of pushing harder, it might be time to step back, sleep more, eat more, or take a deload. At the end of the day, recovery isn't glamorous. It doesn't look as hardcore on Instagram as a PR squat or a shirtless pump picture, but it's the backbone of muscle growth. Training without recovery is like trying to fill a leaky bucket. You pour water in, but it just drains out. The lifters who make the most progress aren't the ones who train the hardest every single day. They're the ones who train hard, recover hard, and do it consistently for years. So if you really want to build muscle faster and smarter, stop treating recovery like an afterthought. Sleep enough, manage your stress, eat to fuel your repair, take rest days seriously, and pay attention to your body's feedback. Do those things, and suddenly your training will start paying dividends. Ignore them, and no matter how hard you push in the gym, you'll always be shortchanging yourself. Recovery isn't optional. It's the other half of the equation.